What's up, team? Sean from Rest to Live. And I want to continue the conversation on raising capital. We talked a little bit about it in another video, what angels are looking for when they're making an investment. But did you know there's programs that exist that are really easy to use to help you raise money from government agencies? It's money that you can borrow and pay back. The rates are generally competitive. They help the banks to guarantee the loan so that they're more accessible, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. This isn't something that I read online or just wanted to talk about. I've actually taken out an SBA loan not once, but twice. The rates were great. It was easy to work with. I got a response back extremely quickly. And guess what? We're able to pay them back without a problem. And if I needed it, I would go and do it again. So as always, I don't want to waste any time. One thing I'm going to ask is please hit that like button and give me a subscribe if you don't mind. And I would also ask too, if you leave a comment, have you ever borrowed money to start a business? It'd be great to understand sort of what the audience is doing here. So let's not waste any time at all. I'm going to jump right in here and start sharing my screen. Let me just find it here as usual. And what we're talking about, excuse me, is the SBA, or the U.S. Small Business Administration. So the sole purpose of the SBA is to help small businesses succeed, because as we know, small businesses employ lots of people. They typically pay people pretty well, and it's just a great way to bring more employment to more small businesses. So a 7A loan is SBA's primary program for providing financial assistance to small businesses. The terms, conditions, guaranteed percentages, and loan amounts can vary, but in general, these are the guidelines. So what I want to do is go over the different types of loans available, and I'm going to speak to the one that I've actually used, like I said, twice. Like every good program, there are always some restrictions. There are always things to be thinking about, but for the most part, I think you're going to find it's not that difficult to use these. So without any further ado, let's jump on in. So first and foremost, we've got our standard 7A SBA loan. This has a maximum loan amount of $5 million. And the SBA will guarantee 85% of it for loans up to 150K and 75% for loans greater than 150K. This is helpful for banks to give this out without having to worry about getting paid back necessarily. Now, the interest rates are flexible in terms of the bank that you're going to ultimately borrow from will set the terms of the loan. You're open to negotiate those terms, but there are limits on those terms so that you're not going to get price gouged by a specific lender or bank here, okay? So just a good call out. And it's going to be similar to a lot of these programs, but just to get started here, I want to go over the first most obvious program. Now, the eligibility decisioning, okay? This shouldn't be a big surprise. Although these loans are easier to get and they have some degree of guarantee from the agency, you still have to be qualified to take out this loan. So they're going to look at the business and they're going to understand, number one, do you have the ability to actually pay this back, right? Are you going to have the amount of revenue from operations to pay back a loan that you take out? So anytime you apply for a business loan of any type, expect to bring a balance sheet, an assets and liabilities statement, some idea of a business plan, how you're going to generate profit or revenue. What I do want to call out, though, that's really interesting. SBA loans are also for buying businesses. So I've actually done this myself. I used an SBA loan to buy or acquire a company that was already operating, went in, did some things, sold it 2 years later. So don't just think about starting at zero. You can find an operation already in place, purchase it with an SBA loan, and then do what you need to do to that business to turn it around, get it back on track, expand operations, whatever the case might be. Now, what's really interesting here too, and I want to call this out, a lot of people confuse business loans with like mortgages where you have 30-year terms. A business loan is typically going to have about 10 years as a maximum loan period. So just be aware that those payments are going to be reflective of whatever time that is. Sometimes they'll ask for 4 years, sometimes it could be 10. It really depends on the lender, the amount of risk, etc. What's also pretty cool too, and we're going to get into a really good one in a second here, but the turnaround time for approval is about 5 to 10 business days. But I'm going to talk to you about how I got my loans approved in under 24 hours. So just hang on for a little bit longer. We're going to get there. And what's nice here is it's going to specifically tell you the forms you have to fill out, excuse me, and also the credit decisions, what they look at and what they need to understand. Now, here's particularly what's interesting. From the collateral perspective, lenders are not required to take collateral for loans up to 25K. For loans that are in excess of 350K, the SBA requires that the lender collateralize the loan to the maximum extent possible up to the loan amount. So if the business's fixed assets do not fully secure the loan, the lender may include trading assets. So book value, for example, from the business and has to take the available equity in the personal real estate. So what this basically means is if you're trying to borrow large amounts of money, they want some sort of a guarantee or an asset or something they can put some guarantee on to make sure that you actually do pay back. Okay, shouldn't be too surprising. The part that's most interesting here that I want you to really hear again is up to 25,000. There is no collateral needed. So essentially, it's almost like a personal loan for a business. Okay, that's a good call out because if you're starting small and just need some money to get rolling, that's a great option to consider. So we also have what's called the 7A small loan. The maximum loan amount is 350K. If you remember from up above, we were going up to 5 million. So 350K is the maximum size. They'll guarantee up to 85% to 150 and 75 for 150 plus again. Same interest rate deal, same eligibility decisioning, right? Same turnaround time of 5 to 10 days. And again, the forms, the collateral, etc. Okay, not much different here, but the process of approvals and amount of lenders who will offer this can be larger. Now, here's the one that you've been waiting to hear about. This is the one that I get the most excited about and what I've used now twice. The SBA Express Loan. So oftentimes you want to be able to act very quickly when you're acquiring capital, if you're buying a business or it's a competitive situation or there's something you need it for right away. Excuse me. So much like you've seen before, the big difference here, is that the maximum loan amount is going to be 500K, but the SBA is only going to guarantee 50% of this. So lenders who take on SBA Express loans are going to have a little more autonomy here than they normally would. They're going to be able to make decisions a little bit faster because more of it is going to be on their paper. So once again, the interest rate will be generally the same. Okay. The eligibility decision is going to be made by the lender. The revolving credit is going to be for 10-year terms, up to 10-year terms. You could do it for a year if you wanted to. I don't think you would, but you could. But what's really, really interesting here, it's a 36-hour turnaround for an answer. So I'm going to say that again. A day and a half, you will have your answer if you've qualified to receive this capital. And once you have been, you can actually get it pretty fast. So I want to tell you a quick story about how this worked. I went into a local bank, asked to meet with the vice president, said I'm interested in getting an SBA Express loan, told them the dollar amount I needed. It was actually small. It was only 50K. We sat down, we filled out the form. On the spot, we opened an EIN or an employee identification number for the new business and the new account so that we could apply that during the application process. And we actually got a turnaround in less than a day. I sort of think back to that and can't believe how fast it was to grab 50K like that. And just for the record, I applied for 50K. I basically put 20% down and got a 40K check ultimately. The interest rate was great. We got a long-term term on the credit and the payback. So it was actually a very flexible loan. We needed more money about 2 years later. So we went back to the exact same bank through the same exact process and we got another 40K. So they are looking for a little bit of an LTV or a spread on what they're allowing you to borrow, plus what you're putting up for assets. But at that point, we're fully operational and getting ready to actually sell. So we just want to make sure we had extra capital on hand. Now, what's really cool here again is if you get down to that dollar amount that we talked about already here, that collateral piece, if you're only going up to about 25K, there's really no collateral needed. It's basically, again, a personal loan for a business. So just something to think about, that if you are an entrepreneur, you already run a startup, you are a founder, you have a local small business, or you're thinking about trying to buy a small business, because they don't all cost millions of dollars. There's lots of small businesses that are low price. This is a great way to get yourself a little bit extra capital, a little working capital, a little capital to start to turn the knobs and pull the levers and get some improvement within the business. So certainly it's worth researching and looking into this. And again, you can see here on these loans, the decisions are made by the lender. And the purchase perspective, lender may request expedited SBA purchase on small loans or in situations where liquidation may be delayed. So what they're looking for is a way out so they can work with the SBA to do that if they need to. But it's a really good call out. It's really fast. It was an easy process for me. It was essentially a 1.5-page paper application I filled out in the office with the vice president, got it all done, submitted. The next day I had a call that the money was ready to go. So, for those people who are out there who are having a hard time thinking about how to raise capital, this is a good thing to look into. It doesn't mean everyone gets approved. It doesn't mean every business qualifies, but at a minimum, it's a good thing that can help a lot of people. There's other programs as well. I'm not going to get into these because they're extremely rare, but if you do export businesses and you need financing for that space, they've got stuff there. They can also help with working capital. There's international trade. There's a whole bunch of different things in here. The only other thing I want to share before I sort of put a wrap on this, if I scroll all the way back up again, because I went a little too fast there, is if we think about terms, conditions, and eligibility. So there are going to be some situations where just flat out, it's not going to be a fit for the SBA program, okay? So I want to call that out. They cover things like the total loan amounts. We already went over that, but just again, it is here in the terms, conditions, and eligibility. It talks about maturity terms, right? And it calls it out. And I think this is a great call out that is important for you as a business owner to hear. SBA loan programs are generally intended to encourage longer term small business financing, which is why they have the 10-year plus terms, because this is really good for a small business to have a reasonable payment so they can factor that into their cash flow. So if you look at like the maximum maturities for SBA loans, right, they do commercial, they do work with commercial real estate. So 25 years for that, which for anyone in the commercial real estate space, that is a really good term. If you're not aware of that, I can assure you 25 years for commercial lending, that's really good. 10 years for equipment and 10 years working capital or inventory loans as well. So again, very reasonable. The interest rates, they call it out right in the page here. They're going to be looking at a base rate plus. Okay, so just make sure you know what these things mean. There's information in here on how to look at that and how to understand what that means. Now, there are different things, okay? So just want to call this out that as you're going through this, there's certain things to think about. There are going to be some fees that you may have to pay. You'll also notice here that some of them don't actually have any fees. So just calling that out as well. And they're always looking to get more veterans to start small businesses. So if you are a veteran, there are programs to help you even more than anyone else who's looking at this, which already is a great program, frankly. There can be prepayment penalties. It doesn't mean you're always going to have one. We did not have one when we took both of ours out. And it's going to talk about some of the eligibility requirements. These are really simple, but I want to call it out because it's important to understand that this is not a loan for everything, right? So pretty much everyone's going to be able to get a loan or some sort of financial assistance from the SBA, but you have to be in business for profit. You have to be working within the US or its territories. You have to have a reasonable owner equity, meaning that you aren't just using the loan to buy 100% of everything you're doing. You have to have some of your own money. Think of it like putting money down on a mortgage. They just want to make sure that you've got some skin in the game. And the goal here is that you're using this after you've used sort of your own money or your own capital. It's not saying that you should bankrupt yourself by any stretch, but if you're sitting on a pile of cash or a huge stock portfolio, you have things of that nature, they do want to make sure that these programs are for people who typically need them. When I was a young guy in my early 20s, there was no capital. So that's why these programs were so good for me. These are what really got me up and running on my feet. Now, of course, like anything else, I would encourage everyone to read through all the special considerations for the types of businesses, who's eligible for it, and what types are not eligible, right? So this should be pretty obvious, but ineligible businesses include illegal activities, loan packaging, speculation, multi-sales distribution, gambling, investment or lending, or where the owner is on parole. It does go into more stuff here, but I want to call it out that, look, if you're doing the right things, you're starting a real business, you're trying to create profit for yourself, you're probably going to be okay. So with that, I wanted to stop sharing and just really call it out that there are lots of these things that are out there. So if you've been just desperately thinking about starting a business, how to begin, what you need to do, spend a little time and research a little bit. I would go right onto what you just saw on my screen and start checking out what they have. Start talking to banks. You can look up on the site where to find those lenders. And actually, you know what? Let me share my screen one more time because I think that's probably a fair call out. These are the 100 most active SBA lenders, right? So you can look at it from an interactive dashboard perspective. Excuse me. Let me just click on that real quick. And look at that. Look at the average loan sizes and the total approval amounts. Wow, that's pretty wild. So let's just see here. I'm just going to pick a random state. Let's just see. Okay. There we go. So just look at all these banks down in that area. Look at that, huh? That's great. So what's cool is there's some that almost feel better, right? Like if I'm only looking for some of these smaller express loans, maybe I want to find someone who's loaned quite a bit, but really with a dollar amount that's close to what I need. So just different ways to think about this and work with it. But again, I just want to call it out. There are a lot of things out there, a lot of ways to sort through this data, a lot of ways to find access to the capital. So if you're not doing that, I would urge you to do it. It doesn't mean you can't still go other routes. You can still try to raise money from investors. You can use crowdfunding. But it's important to understand that there are programs that are out there designed to help people start businesses, because that is something that's good for the economy and generally good for our neighborhoods and just in general good for the country. So I hope this was helpful. I would really appreciate you let me know if you ever thought about something like this below. And otherwise, have a great day. Also, I'm going to post this on both channels. If you didn't know it yet, I started a second channel that's going to be really focused on entrepreneurship, startups, capital, running and operating those businesses. So please subscribe to that channel as well. I'm going to post this to both. Otherwise, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and appreciate you watching. So everybody, have a great day. We'll see you later.